Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. This is quite an amazing opportunity to talk with our friends and colleagues from different parts of the world about common interests and our interest in economic development, our interest in business development, job creation, revenue generation, and colleague development. I think working together is the best way. Turkey is certainly a strong partner of ours, and Mexico is a strong partner of the U.S. And I think it's really important between yesterday's presentations about the United States and today's presentations. It's really key to note the differences in the economies, differences in the business requirements, and business in the and opportunities in business. We have worked with many companies over the years around the world and have been honored to participate with Gazi Technopark and other entities in Turkey to identify business opportunities globally for business expansion, trade representations, trade delegations. And what we found is that different companies in Turkey should look at different parts of the world for different types of opportunities. Not every market is good for each business. So I think you'll see today that Mexico has great opportunities for different types of businesses, and it's really important to make the right decision on where your company should expand globally. And I'm honored today to have two great colleagues and friends, Tom Johnson and Ricardo Mendoza, each from different organizations, and I'll let them introduce themselves. But I know that obviously both have great experience in Mexico. Tom has sort of feet in both countries, but has a deep and long-standing relationship in Mexico. And Ricardo, I learned today, is a lifelong Mexican, born and raised, which is wonderful. And something that some of you know is I was born and lived in Madrid. So I am not born in the United States. I was a Spanish citizen and have moved here as a child. So Ricardo, unfortunately, I know no Spanish except 2 or 3 words. But it's great to speak with you all. And Tom, are you kicking things off or Ricardo?
According to the agenda, Ricardo is intended to go first,
Okay.
although my topic is more general than Ricardo. So if you want, I can shift mine up front.
That'd be fine. Hazal, Turl, do you mind?
No, that's fine for me, and it makes a lot of sense. So please go ahead.
Sure. I don't mind at all. No.
More of an introductory and overview. Is that all right, Ricardo?
Yeah, sure. That's fine for me. It makes a lot of sense.
Sounds great. Well, Tom, I'll leave it to you. Please introduce yourself. Give us some background. I see we have a great number of participants, names that I am familiar with, and some that I'm not. So welcome to the audience, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. Tom, I'll leave it to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to see if I can navigate sharing my screen to put my slides up. One moment here. I am here, share, and this, let's see if that works. Meeting view. How's that? Does it look good? Is the slide okay? Is it okay?
Yes, it looks fine.
Okay,
Looks
great.
good, Tom.
Okay, thank you very much, Keith. And thank you very much to our colleagues at Gazi Technopark for giving us the opportunity to participate in this event here today, which is a great pleasure for us. My name again is Tom Johnston, and I'm a partner at Business Development Partners, which is an agency here in Mexico City, the capital of Mexico, that we conduct market research and other types of business support services for foreign companies that are looking to enter the Mexican market or increase their business if they already have business established in Mexico. And so we provide a number of services like market research, relationship development, partner searches, regulatory research, event organization, and things like this in order to help our colleagues and clients from other countries do business here in Mexico. And Ricardo will talk more specifically about legal topics in his presentation following mine. What I would like to talk about today is first provide a general overview of Mexico as an economy and as a market for foreign countries, for foreign companies that are considering doing business in Mexico. Often in events like this, you have some folks who are already quite familiar with Mexico, but then there are other folks who need or are interested in learning about Mexico. So I'm mainly going to focus on people who are less familiar or less have less experience doing business in Mexico, in case folks don't know that much about it. So my initial comments will be an overview about Mexico as an economy and as a market. I'll follow that with some discussion of how the methods that some of the companies we work with commonly use to do business here in Mexico, and some models of entering the market or expanding in the market that are quite common because they have some advantages. And then the third component of my discussion will be a few brief comments about the business environment, specifically relating to the current government that we have, which for folks who have been doing business in Mexico in the past, our current government is somewhat different, I would say significantly different in its approach to the business environment than the previous several governments for the past good number of years we've had. So I'll just make a few comments about that so folks are aware of that. So without further introduction, I will continue to the first slide. Let's see how that works. Okay, here we go. Mexico is a rather large economy. It's commonly ranked somewhere around 11th, 12th, or 13th largest economy in the world. I found in looking at some of the comparative data that apparently it's in terms of GDP, generally or somewhat in the range of Turkey as well as a point of reference. And so I think Turkey's a little bit larger economy, but close to Mexico in terms of overall ranking in the world economies. And something that is very important to us here in Mexico, and we find that is not always well known among folks from companies that come from other parts of the world, is that Mexico is in North America. It's frequently, people frequently ask us or assume that Mexico is in South America for some reason, but it's actually in North America, together with the United States and Canada. If you can see the little globe on the left-hand side of the screen, where it says Mexico, the little yellow country just south of the United States, it's pretty clear that you can see that it's in North America rather than South America. And one of the most important things about this geographic location for us is that we are connected to the United States, a worldwide big economic player that has a lot of impact on us, certainly as its neighbor. And we have a very long land border with the United States. And that's a border which people, business, and goods and trade are crossing constantly, all day long, every day of the year. And that is really a huge factor for us doing business in Mexico, and also for foreign companies that are doing business in Mexico, many of which use their participation or their operations in Mexico to gain some sort of access to the United States, and also by extension to Canada. And of course, Mexico, for anyone that is not aware, is in a free trade agreement. The North American Free Trade Agreement has a different name now, but same type of arrangement. And so the three countries, Canada, United States, and Mexico, are united in a free trade agreement, which has an enormous impact on Mexico in among other ways, because approximately 75 to 80% of Mexico's exports go to the United States. So it's very important for our economy. As an overall general place to do business, you can see that the population of Mexico, approximately 130 million, is even larger than the substantial population of Turkey. So that generally generates a market of a lot of people wanting to consume consumer goods, needing all kinds of products, many of which are not produced here in Mexico, and that creates a very wide-ranging and diverse market for products and sometimes services provided by companies from other countries, whether it be North America, Europe, Asia, or whatever other part of the world. Mexico is considered to be a developing country still, I believe, meaning that we have some very highly developed portions of the economy and some very wealthy people. Also, a very large portion of the population is in the working or lower economic income level. And so that is a major factor in terms of just the general environment and doing business here as well, but also creates potential because there is a substantial portion of the population that is seeking to rise from an economic, socioeconomic strata that has challenges into the middle class and beyond, and desiring wider range and higher quality products and services and things like that. But overall, particularly due to Mexico's participation in the North American Free Trade Agreement, the country has a highly advanced and diversified economy with wide-ranging industries for manufacturing and for services. And so this generates potential for opportunities, as Mexico is traditionally a very open country to to dealing or conducting business with other countries and other parts of the world, with a number of free trade agreements with other regions of the world and other countries in addition to the United States. So this creates a market as well. Over the past year or two, like most regions of the world, most countries, we have been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. When things shut down in 2020, we shut down the country for a couple months in terms of businesses, and we have been slowly trying to emerge from that shutdown. We suffered an economic contraction of approximately 8.2% last year. I think most countries suffered some type of contraction. This year, we are not likely to revert that contraction. The government is projecting 6% growth this year. Other projections are lower than that. And most financial institutions are projecting something along the lines of 3% in 2022. And most of the analysts that we are seeing at this time are projecting that Mexico is unlikely to recover in terms of economic activity to the levels of 2019 prior to the COVID pandemic until 2024. So we're still struggling to recover and return to the economic level of activity and industrial activity. Also, as elsewhere in the world, we have been severely impacted by the famous supply chain bottlenecks, because much of our industry, our advanced manufacturing industries, are connected, very integrated with the United States and Canada. And so you have a lot of sending back and forth of inputs and components between manufacturing operations in North America. And this has been extremely impacted by the supply chain problems that are plaguing the global industry in general. In terms of just some of our attendees may be much more familiar with this topic than I am, but in terms of the economic relationship with Turkey, I have seen a range of figures about how much trade is done, somewhere between $700 million and $1 to $1.2 billion around 2019 is what Mexico imports from Turkey. probably not one of Turkey's largest trading partners. Nonetheless, Mexico apparently is Turkey's largest export market in Latin America. I'm sure Brazil is important in this regard as well. And some of the products that we have seen that Mexico imports from Turkey include auto parts, textiles, machinery, and agricultural equipment. The agricultural equipment are things that we've actually seen in our business here. And as well, in my company, we work quite a bit with the housewares industry, and we have a number of Turkish colleagues, and we are familiar with a number of very high quality Turkish producers of housewares products, and we see them every year at the Housewares Show in Chicago. And also we have seen that the Turkish diplomats here in Mexico have expressed interest in pursuing a free trade agreement with Mexico. The Mexican economic authorities have expressed openness to that. Mexico has a very large number of free trade agreements with other countries around the world. And so there has been a lot of very positive discussion over the past 3 or 4 years in the, let's say, in the government circles. However, as far as I am aware, there still has not been significant advancement towards a free trade agreement with Turkey, but nonetheless, because both countries appear to be interested, that is something that could be on the horizon. If you are thinking ahead to the next coming few years, there may be on the horizon a free trade agreement between Mexico and Turkey. Some of the most important industries in Mexico include tourism, which is huge. Many folks come to the beaches in Mexico, which are well known. Some of our attendees today may have been to Mexico, to Cancun or to Puerto Vallarta or something like that. So that's a big industry, which requires a lot of inputs that we obtain from abroad as well, in terms of gourmet foods and equipment for kitchens and restaurants and hotels and vehicles and things like this. So that's an industry that generates a lot of different types of demand for products and equipment. We have a very large and diversified manufacturing sector, including highly advanced manufacturing in certain particular industries, which I'll mention in a moment. And we also have the petroleum industry, which for decades was one of Mexico's, I think it was Mexico's largest industry, certainly for obtaining hard currency by exporting the petroleum. In more recent years, Mexico's petroleum industry has declined somewhat, but the current government, as I will mention shortly, is pushing very hard to revive the petroleum industry. And so that is something that is still a factor, and our own company works quite a bit with manufacturers of specialized equipment, such as pipeline and filters and pumping equipment and control devices and things like this for the petroleum industry and other areas of the energy industry. In terms of advanced manufacturing, Mexico has a highly advanced manufacturing industry for medical devices and all types of equipment for hospitals and things like this. Also has a very large and advanced pharmaceutical industry, much of which, but not all, is operations of international pharmaceutical companies. The same can be said of the medical devices as well. So in industries of this type, you have a substantial portion of the industry that is international companies, multinationals, but you also have some highly developed local Mexican companies as well. Probably our largest advanced manufacturing industry is the automotive industry. Most of the world's leading international OEM vehicle manufacturers in automobiles, light trucks, and trucks maintain manufacturing operations here in Mexico. So that's a very important industry for us, which of course creates secondary and tertiary markets for equipment, coatings, manufacturing equipment, even the drill bits and things like this. And we also have a similarly advanced, but perhaps not as large aerospace industry, located, concentrated commonly in the center part of the country and also in the Northwest, close to the border with California in the United States. Mexico does not produce finished aircraft yet. It produces probably almost all the components that go into an airplane. And so we are expecting that over the next probably 10 years, Mexico will begin to produce finished aircraft as well. I should add also, I didn't think of it when I was preparing the slides, but that we have three very large and highly developed industrial urban areas in Mexico. One, of course, is the capital, Mexico City, here in the center of the country. The other is Monterrey in the northeast, which is a very industrialized region that has a lot of steel manufacturing, has auto manufacturing, things like this. And also in the northwest of Mexico, along the border with the United States, you have a very large amount of manufacturing and what is sometimes called maquiladora manufacturing, which means assembly plants, where the foreign companies send the parts to the Mexican assembly plant and they put it together and they re-export it to wherever their home client company is. And that's along the border with California, between the cities of Tijuana and Mexicali. So that's also an important region. And also in the western part of the country, Guadalajara, Mexico's second largest city, which is home to the electronics industry, advanced computer programming and app development, and all types of high-tech industries, as well as food processing and other types of industries. And now passing to the last point here, I wanted to mention that the environment includes a highly competitive environment for new entrants to the Mexican market in industrial equipment, in consumer goods. We, of course, have the free trade agreement with the United States and Canada, but we also have a trade facilitation agreement with Europe. And so the highest and quality and most sophisticated equipment coming out of the United States, Canada, and Europe are all mainly the largest, best known brands are all established here. And now in recent times, over the past 10 to 15 years, China has become a major player in the Mexican market, originally because of its lower price point, which Chinese equipment generally was considered to be cheaper, but not as high quality. But over the years, the quality has improved, making China an even more formidable competitor in most markets for industrial equipment, particularly here in Mexico. In terms of the methodologies that companies from abroad use here in Mexico, the most common to sell into Mexico is to work with a local sales partner, which provides a number of advantages, including the local sales partner generally will import the products into Mexico. The local sales partner usually has existing relationships and sales channels well established in the specific niche of each type of product. And sometimes if a type of product requires permits or registration for regulatory compliance, such as medical devices or any type of food ingredient and things like this, the local sales partners are instrumental in assisting the foreign manufacturer in obtaining the proper permits and compliance. And so that's a very key relationship to build. And that's one of the types of relationships that our own company helps foreign companies to find and establish. There's also a number of e-commerce channels. Some foreign companies use a dedicated Mexican online website to sell their goods, or they sell through local channels such as Mercado Libre is the local one, but also Amazon sells here. And as Ricardo will describe in greater detail momentarily, some companies establish their own subsidiary or representation office in Mexico and interact directly with their customers here in the country. But you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. And then finally, to conclude, I would like to just mention, this is something that maybe some folks are not aware of. We have a government now that began 3 years ago. It's halfway through its 6-year term. The president is commonly known as AMLO, A-M-L-O. And the difference between this government and most of the previous governments going back approximately 30 years is that this government does not express an overtly pro-business approach. This is something that the previous governments were all very pro-business, and they were seeking to improve the environment for foreign investment and for providing a number of incentives for investment and development of industry. And that has changed philosophically under the current government, which is focused more on attending the poorest sectors of the country. And so one of the areas that this has affected the environment for business is that the current government has not respected all of the contracts and concessions and agreements entered into by previous governments. And so that has created an environment of some degree of uncertainty for investment, because the foreign investors are not sure whether their businesses will be able to make a return on investment and be protected from potential, let's say, nationalization or something like that. So a lot of the changes in the public policy environment have been challenged in the courts, and they're tied up right now, but it has created a certain degree of uncertainty, particularly for foreign investment, although in terms of the manufacturing sector, most of the businesses going on largely unaffected, but there is some concern about this. The upside of that, which this is based on my colleagues and my opinion of reading the environment here, we expect that after the current government concludes in 2024, that the next government, which we don't know what it will be, we don't know who will be president, but regardless, we do expect that the environment in terms of incentives, in terms of the tax environment, and in terms of respect for the rule of law and respect of agreements with foreign companies, we expect that to improve after 2024, because it's highly unlikely to get any worse than it is now. So on that note, I will conclude my comments. And I would like to say thank you once again to all our colleagues. Thank you to Gaza Technopark and to P3 Innovation. And I will turn it back over to you, Keith, and we will hear from Ricardo about the legal environment. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it. That was great and very informative. If you have, I would think it would make sense to have a couple questions between the presentations, just while the information is fresh.
Okay.
So if we can open that up, if anyone in the audience would like to ask Mr. Johnston a question about his presentation before we start with Ricardo.
Okay, I can ask.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for nice presentation, Tom. And I just wondering, between Mexico and Turkey, trading business is go through United States or directly? If you have any idea on that, please explain.
Okay, I don't have personal experience in that, because in our company, we haven't had the pleasure of working directly with Turkish companies, but I do think that it's probably a combination based on what I've heard from other colleagues and looking at some of the information. You do have quite a bit of export of machinery and things like this from Turkey directly to Mexico by way of Mexican importers that are working directly with Turkish companies. As I mentioned, working with a local sales partner is one of the most common mechanisms that resolves how you get your products from Turkey into the hands of Mexican consumers. And we are, in our own work, we have come across a number of distributors in Mexico of machinery and equipment for industry that are representing Turkish brands. So we know that these folks are likely getting their products from Turkey directly to Mexico. That said, we also know of a number of cases where, let's say, anecdotally, I will say, a Turkish company already has operations in the United States, and by expanding in terms of representation of offering their products in the Mexico market, they are able to export from the United States to Mexico. I think some of the companies that, this may be the case with the housewares industry as well, some of the companies that have consumer goods could offer them online in e-commerce in Mexico and possibly ship from the United States. So if you have some stock or a sales partner in the United States, they are able to easily export to Mexico. So I think both of those options are currently being used by Turkish companies to sell in Mexico.
Thank you very much.
Also, Tom, you touched on this quite a bit about manufacturing, but some of us who are a little bit older recall that many products that we purchased in the United States said made in Japan many years ago. And then that shifted to, of course, made in China. And now we're seeing a major shift to other countries. Obviously, China will retain that global dominance of manufacturing for some time, but we're seeing a big shift to Vietnam and clearly to Mexico. So as Mexico expands its production capacity, it certainly could be leveraged by high-tech development companies in Turkey to do the manufacturing in Mexico at competitive rates. So that's just something that we've seen here as a trend.
Okay, I would like to, add a complimentary comment. I think I agree with what you said, and I remember made in Japan was a very common thing when I was a kid. That Mexico, because it has over the past 25 years or so developed a substantial and diversified, particularly advanced manufacturing industries, you have now expertise not only in production but in management as well at a lot of these companies, and you have a lot of engineers coming out of the Mexican institutes of higher learning and training, and that provides a basis, regardless of the type of product in many cases, but a good basis to find either existing companies or existing operations or people that you need to establish an operation, not only in production, but also in research and development. And research and development is one of the areas in which Mexico, and I'm sure India, China, likely Turkey as well, also are quite important in this space, where some multinationals are looking for opportunities in different regions to carry out research and development at a lower cost than they would in the home country, whether it be Europe, United States, or whatever. And Mexico now has become something of a magnet for advanced research and development operations, particularly in Guadalajara. We see a lot of that. We see it in Mexico City and in Monterrey as well. And so for companies that are thinking about Latin America as a whole, as a future, either base of production operations or a market for selling advanced products, that's another area that Mexico could be an option for some of those companies.
It's also important to make the observation that with the current supply chain problems, clearly, if it's made in China, in many cases, it's sitting on tankers out in the water waiting to be unloaded. We do not see the same complexities with products made in Mexico, making it into the United States or into Latin America or South America. Those channels are wide open. I mean, there is some shortages of truck drivers, but I'd take that problem over shipping containers that aren't being unloaded. So if you're looking for an access to one of the strongest economies in the world, coming through Mexico, going north or south is a very strong potential, especially with the political and legal opportunities in place.
Absolutely. And one of the themes that has been getting a lot of discussion, a lot of observation, there's lots of webinars about this. And also we at our company have received many phone calls and emails kind of testing the waters, is the topic of companies, particularly elsewhere in North America, in the United States and Canada, that have been doing manufacturing in China for the past 30 years or 20 years. All of a sudden, the relationship between the United States and China began getting complicated in the previous US government. And also the shipping has become an issue. And now, particularly with supply chain complications, it's become a real problem for folks who are concerned about what the direction of China in the future is going to be. And the phone started ringing and people are asking, you know, if I wanted to diversify my manufacturing locations and operations, is Mexico an option for me? And in many cases, it is. Of course, moving manufacturing around the world is not that simple, but Mexico does offer a good base for companies to consider shifting manufacturing from China to Mexico, particularly if they're looking to sell to the rest of the North American market and also to the rest of the Latin American market. And that's a real topic these days. Anybody who's going to webinars and to international business events who works in Latin America or in the United States is probably hearing something about that topic, shifting manufacturing from China to Mexico.
Other questions for Tom?
I think there is one, Keith. Jemina has she raised her hand. I can see her out on the screen in the corner.
I thank you so much for recognizing my little hand on the Zoom. So anyway, I got some question about manufacturing in there. You have been mentioned about it's going to be big player on the world soonly. But how about if industry 4.0 is in use by manufacturing or automatization, any automatization steps maybe? Do you have or do you see any observation about that? I wonder, in industries, any industries, it doesn't matter over the manufacturing.
Okay, certainly. I don't know exactly what the specifics of Industry 4.0 refer to, but in terms of automation and
yeah, it's about automation.
Okay, and robotics and the Internet of Things and this type of thing. That what we have is a range of experiences here, and in a substantial portion of Mexican manufacturing that is not the most advanced manufacturing, you still have not in Industry 4.0. You have mechanical stuff, people carrying boxes around, this kind of thing. However, in the most advanced sectors of Mexican manufacturing, it's absolutely, I would say, at the level of the most advanced levels of manufacturing you find elsewhere in the world, in terms of robotics, in terms of clean rooms, in terms of software controlled CNC, and everything that you would find in Korea or the United States and probably Turkey as well. And those sectors, for example, would be some of the ones that I mentioned, such as aerospace, pharmaceutical, and certainly automotive, and in some of the, let's say, the tier one manufacturers that produce components for automobiles, trucks, and aircraft. And one of the reasons for this is because much of the most advanced manufacturing being done in Mexico is the operations of multinational companies that are based in Europe or elsewhere. And so these companies are installing the management systems and the computer systems and the robotics and the automation that they use in their Asian or European or North American plants. They're establishing them in Mexico. And so there is a certain degree of technology transfer there, particularly in terms of know-how and managing these types of systems. And so in the niches and the industry sectors that are dominated by the most advanced international multinationals, absolutely, we have that situation that's already well established. But in the, let's say, the secondary and third level tiers of local manufacturing, probably not so much, but that creates potential as well. So in the Mexican trade shows, haven't been to one personally in a while, but up until the pandemic, let's say in the trade shows, there were a lot of companies from Asia and Europe demonstrating their robotics equipment, and there was a lot of interest in that. So if you have a company that's in that space, certainly it might be of interest to consider the Mexican market. At the same time, the multinationals often make their equipment and strategic expansion decisions in their home offices, and so it might not be necessarily selling directly to the Mexico subsidiary, but these are on a case-by-case basis. It's in a case like General Motors or something like that, it's not easy to approach the local General Motors Mexico if you want to sell something at that level. But those are some of the things to consider on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, thank you so much for the answer. In case of, for example, for Pratt & Whitney or General Motors, the places such like Mexico or Turkey, they got really huge agreements because it's a new place and it's a good place to publish a book. So we might see different companies in the different sides of the world together at those kind of areas. So I believe as a consortium, and Mexico will be much better to getting jump about that situation.
Certainly, we really feel like that there's a great deal. Mexico is doing well industrially as it is, but it should be a great potential because there's also a substantial degree of unrealized potential for growth, and so that's one of the things that we consider to be an opportunity here in Mexico. We're a little bit stalled, as I mentioned, because of the current government, which has de-emphasized economic growth and industrial promotion. But we're pretty sure that that's going to last only for another 3 years. And then after that, we'll get back to generally where we were before in trying to take advantage of the opportunities. Right now, with companies asking us, hey, can I move my production from China to Mexico? That's a tremendous opportunity that Mexico at a federal level is definitely not promoting or taking advantage of. However, it's important to note that in Mexico, the state governments have been instrumental in trying to engage with foreign investors and with potential opportunities for industrial development. So the state governments in Mexico are, especially now, a factor to consider for companies looking to really establish operations in Mexico, if that's the objective, because the state governments are more likely to engage than the federal government is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to ask for Cemile.
Yes, sir, I'm listening.
Do you have any business to Mexico as a MIA technology?
We are thinking about getting in and publishing an office in New York, around the European Union. And of course, in areas such like Canada or Mexico, we are thinking about opening.
You think now or before the event?
We already made all the feasibility documents.
Okay,
We are
thank
waiting,
I'm just wondering. Thank
stock
you.
market. We are waiting now.
That's a good opportunity.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
Okay, is there any question?
We can take also comment.
Yeah, or yes, or
Not
any
only-
comment. I think it was a great presentation, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It gave us a great coverage of, an overview of Mexico, currently, and the situation, also, a little bit forecast for the future and where Mexico was, in the past. And that the strong manufacturing base will, give Mexico more advantage, if not more investments and more manufacturing moves up there, and this will naturally happen, I guess, as the direction the world goes right now with all this supply chain situations. This is where it's headed. This is what I believe, and I see that Mexico is a gateway and a big opportunity for companies who want to do business with South America, and also with the United States. So thank you very much. This is my small just pledge comment there before we pass on. And
Can we have more comment from Tom if he has some experience? If you compare trading with Mexico or United States, which one is easy or which one is advantage? For example, if United States easy, maybe as I said before, maybe they use that way, but directly is very advantage. They can choose that way.
Well, I have to confess, I don't think I can compare trying to sell or do business in the United States to doing it in Mexico from another country, because we really only work here in Mexico. However, I would say that Mexico over the past 30 years has gone to great lengths to try to be a place where it's easy to do business, because we have a lot of the free trade agreements and trade facilitation agreements. The country has tried very hard to reduce a lot of the non-tariff barriers to trade, tried to streamline operations in terms of what it takes to set up a subsidiary or operations, which you'll hear about in a moment. With differing degrees of success. Here in Mexico, we commonly find that there's a lot of aggravation in trying to follow all the official procedures for things. But based on what I have heard from other colleagues compared to Brazil, they say that Mexico is an easier place to do business. With regard to the United States, because Mexico is so integrated economically with the United States, I would hope that both the United States and Mexico, and by extension Canada as well, as part of the North American market, are a welcoming and open and fairly streamlined and not so difficult place to enter and begin doing business. So I would like to think that it's relatively similar in that regard, although I haven't put that to the test personally, I will say.
Thank you. Kate, do you want to comment on that?
I have nothing much more to add to that. I think that language is a big barrier in many cases, and that should not be an issue with either Mexico or the US. And it also depends, and what Tom mentioned earlier, it also depends on the government that's in power, if you will, at the time. And good or bad, it does change in both Mexico and the United States at some levels and some regularity. So I think from a political perspective, there are some issues to be considered from political administration to political administration. But what I found is underlying the people and businesses that are in place in both countries are consistent and wanting to work globally with other companies on a consistent basis. So I think the other thing is whether you do shipping and trade and export, or whether you actually establish a partner relationship in Mexico or in the US, or if you establish a manufacturing or sales distribution branch in Mexico or in the United States. All 3 or 4 options are unique and would have their own challenges and their own opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, if there's no other questions, why don't we move on to Ricardo and get his presentation, and then we can circle back for questions as well when Ricardo finishes. Is that okay with everyone?
Great.
Ricardo, let me give this to you if you'd introduce yourself and begin, and I'm sure folks will have good questions when you finish as well.
Sure. Thank you very much, Keith. And I agree it was a great presentation and a great introduction by Tom regarding the Mexican market and context from an economic and political point of view. And well, my part is a bit different, but it does make sense that Tom's part was discussed previously because my part will make a lot more sense now. So, well, I'm a lawyer, and we have an office here in Mexico City and in Monterrey, which is one of the largest cities in Mexico, as Tom mentioned. And let me just share my screen now to begin the presentation. Just give me a second. I will change the. All right. Looks better now, does it? All right. We're good to go, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you. So, yeah, as I was saying, I am a lawyer, and well, we have a couple of offices in Mexico. We have one here in Mexico City, and we have another one in Monterrey, which is one of the largest cities in Mexico, apart from Mexico City, Monterrey, and we also have Guadalajara, as Tom mentioned. And well, my topic is called how to set up a company in Mexico, and this is assuming that after carrying out an analysis of your business model, you guys decide that setting up a company, or as we will see now, a branch or a representative office makes more sense than joining with a local partner here in Mexico. And this is very important. And I believe that Tom's approach was really appropriate in this sense because we've seen many cases of many foreign entities that have used these alternatives that we will talk about in a moment, and we have also seen them joining with local or regional partners. And I mean, as we you guys know, and we will conclude with that. Well, this is a case by case decision, and with a joint analysis of an expert like Tom and analyzing legal and tax considerations of your business model, I'm pretty sure that you guys can make a very appropriate decision on how to make a reasonable business and a reasonable profit out of a commercial relationship with a Mexican company. So, in general terms, I will refer to the legal considerations and the tax considerations about three very commonly used figures in terms of doing business in Mexico. And these three figures are the following. The first one is a branch, and the second one is a representative office. These both concepts are commonly used as synonyms, but they're not. They've got some very relevant differences, but both of them, as we will see in a moment, are different from incorporating a Mexican legal entity. And the third option, the third alternative is exactly that, incorporating a Mexican legal entity, which is the most complex and also a formal way of setting up a business in Mexico. So regarding some very relevant and general tax considerations, we've got some very important federal contributions in Mexico. The first one, and a very relevant one, is the corporate income tax. And well, in Mexico, we don't have a local income tax. We just have a federal income tax. And this is this is for you guys to know, the current corporate income tax rate is set up on a 30% rate for companies. And we also have a special tax on goods and services, which taxes some, as the name says, goods and services that are very important for the government in terms of contribution. And you can find in here cigarettes, alcohol, and energy drinks, and stuff like that. And each product will have its own special tax. You will have also the excise tax by excellence, which is the value added tax, and the current rate of the value added tax is a 16% rate. And lastly, you have, if you guys have employees here in Mexico, you will have to take care of social security contributions. All right. So this is like a very general overview of federal contributions. And moving forward, we'll talk about a branch first. So a branch is an entity which will have no legal personality of its own. And this is very similar with the representative office, because when we're talking about a branch, as you may know, we are talking about uh, setting up a legal relationship with the headquarters. So basically, what we have is a foreign entity which opens up an office in Mexico, and well, the headquarters in another jurisdiction will dictate the rules and policies related to the operation of the company. But legally speaking, any third party, any Mexican third party who carries out operations with this branch will not be entering into an agreement with a legal entity that is different from the headquarters. All right, or so we will have a direct relationship with a foreign entity. So the procedure to establish a branch here in Mexico is we must have an express authorization by the headquarters, which must be legally granted and notarized in the other jurisdiction. Then we will require an authorization for the Mexican Ministry of Economy, and we will need to register this branch before the Foreign Investments National Registry of the Ministry of Economy. And lastly, we will have to register this branch two before the Public Registry of Commerce. And this is due to the fact that it is a commercial entity, lastly, that will carry out business activities. And talking about some very relevant tax effects and duties is that the Mexican income tax law, which is, I have uh, I'm referring to it as MITL, establishes that any foreign resident with a permanent establishment in Mexico will be obligated to pay income tax. And pursuant to the Mexican income tax law, a branch is by itself a permanent establishment in Mexico. So any income attributable to this permanent establishment will generate or will trigger an income tax. Nonetheless, it is also very common in the Mexican market that if it, with the proper analysis and after carrying out the proper review of the activities, if we could determine that these activities are not part of the business activities of the headquarters or the company itself, and these are merely auxiliary activities, we could avoid triggering any income tax. This is, as I said, common and it can be done, but in general terms, when creating a branch, you will automatically create a permanent establishment in Mexico. And this branch will be entitled, if you wish to hire employees in the Mexican market. And well, if you are willing to hire employees, then you will be also subject to withhold some income tax on their salaries. All right. So regarding the value added tax, if an act is taxable for value-added tax purposes, then the branch will be able to do this VAT mechanism, which I believe is common in the world, in by means of which you credit the input VAT versus the output VAT, and well, on a monthly basis, you will determine if you have an VAT in favor or a VAT in charge to pay to the Mexican tax authority. And well, this calculation is done on a monthly basis. And if there is any payable difference, then the company or the branch must pay this difference to the Mexican tax authority. All right. So why incorporating a branch? Well, in general terms, the losses or expenses in Mexico may be deducted by the head office or by the headquarters. I mean, we would need to make some further analysis on the local requirements of each jurisdiction, but in general terms and in most of the countries, we have this regime, and the prorated expenses could be deductible in Mexico's branch as long as the taxpayer or this branch complies with certain requirements set forth in the Mexican income tax law. And I would say that these advantages would be applicable to Turkey because, I mean, I know for a fact that some years ago in 2013, Mexico and Turkey entered into a treaty to avoid double taxation. So it is very likely that these advantages will be applicable. All right. So moving on, we will talk about a representative office, which is, as I said in the beginning, it is also another regime that allows a foreign entity to carry out business activities in Mexico without creating a Mexican legal entity. So usually it is a physical space, literally like a physical office established by a foreign resident in Mexico. It means that this foreign resident has got a formal presence in Mexico, and same case as the branch, it has the same legal personality as the headquarters, right? And speaking about representative offices, the representative offices will only and exclusively be entitled to carry out auxiliary activities, all right? So for purpose of the branch can carry out business activities of the company or auxiliary activities. But when we talk about an auxiliary or a representative office, then this figure will only be entitled to carry out auxiliary activities. So this representative office is not a permanent establishment. We can figure that out. All right. Well, the headquarters will be responsible for any expenses incurred, naturally, and they will not have their own capital, although the headquarters usually assign a budget for local expenses. So talking about requirements, the procedure is very similar, almost identical to the one applicable to the branch. And basically, we need to get an authorization from the Ministry of Economy and to register this representative office before the Public Registry of Commerce, right? Regarding tax effects and duties, as I said, a representative office is generally not subject to taxation in Mexico because it does not carry out officially business activities. It just carries out auxiliary activities that will not conclude by closing a business or entering into a business relationship. So in general terms and with a proper advice, these sort of figures will not constitute a permanent establishment, right? Well, and if the representative office started carrying out business activities, then we should modify the regime to a branch or to a corporation, right? And well, the headquarters will have certain obligations as a foreign resident. And in some cases, if you've got employees here in Mexico, you might be obligated to register as an employer, and you must keep separate accounting records regarding headquarters and representative offices. And the representative offices will have to get their own tax ID number, and this is because they will be entitled to pay the VAT that is collected eventually, right? So, and the rep office may also incur in certain expenses as part of its normal operations, which is very usual, such as rents, travel expenses, and annual salaries, if applicable. And regarding value-added tax, a representative office will not be able to carry out this offsetting procedure I talked about. So basically, this means that the VAT will be absorbed by the headquarters and probably deducted, but economically, from an economic point of view, it will be paid by the representative office here in Mexico. And well, basically, it almost be a planned from the headquarters, so this makes sense. And the corporate structure is very similar to a branch from a strictly corporate and commercial point of view, but the repercussions here in Mexico will have some similars, some very slight differences and very important similarities. All right, as we have seen. And finally, and this is the most interesting topic is, well, how to incorporate a Mexican legal entity if this were the case and if this made sense for your business. And I want to say that incorporating a Mexican legal entity is a very simple procedure in general terms. It is fast, all right, and it is cheap also in terms of incorporation. And the thing here is that, as you are well aware and might imagine, incorporating a foreign entity brings us some very relevant obligations, and it will only make sense in some scenarios. All right. So, um, from a legal standpoint, Mexican legal entities will need to be incorporated before a notary public, and they will need to be registered before the local public registry of commerce. And they will be incorporated by means of their own corporate bylaws, which contain, as in many countries, the name of the company, the name of the shareholders, their corporate structure, the purpose of the company, the duration of the company, the shareholders' equity, which in Mexico we have this possibility of incorporating an entity with fixed and variable capital or equity, which is not really common around the globe, but it is in Mexico. The corporate domicile of the company, and the specific regulations for the management, reserve funds, dissolution, and liquidation procedures of the company. The main types of companies in Mexico are usually two of them. We've got more, but the most commonly used are these ones. The first one is a limited liability company, which would be a Sociedad de Responsabilidad Limitada. And the second one would be a corporation, which is a Sociedad Anónima. All right. So they are, I would say that a very large part of the companies that are currently incorporated in Mexico are one of these two regimes. All right. Both of them are limited in terms of liability. The limited liability company is eligible to check the box for transparency tax purposes in the US. And while talking about the limited liability, it may be organized by 2 and up to 50 partners, which receive a partnership interests, which is different from a share certificate. And regarding the corporation, you must have at least 2 shareholders, and there is no maximum number of shareholders. And you've got no partnership interest, but shares, all right? And well, you will receive a share certificate instead of this partnership interests. And well, the minimum amount to incorporate one of these two entities is 1 Mexican peso, which is a very, very small number in terms of a dollar, for example. And well, Mexican corporations and companies are usually for foreign entities purposes. We're used to incorporating some special rights or regulations which are very common around the globe, and they are acknowledged by the Mexican commercial entities law, such as rights of first refusals or tag-alongs, drag-alongs, poison pills, which are very standard mechanisms in terms of business and transactions in the globe. So we have very flexible ways of incorporating a Mexican legal entity. The procedure of incorporating a legal entity would be to obtain an authorization by the Ministry of Economy to use a corporate name. What the ministry does is verifying if another entity is currently using that name, and if it isn't, it will issue an authorization in probably a week or 2 weeks tops because of the pandemic. The second step would be to execute the Incorporation Act before the notary public. This Incorporation Act contains the corporate bylaws. And what we do usually for our clients is to avoid having the need of traveling to Mexico. They usually grant a power of attorney in their countries and apostille it. They send it through traditional mail, and they grant us a power of attorney to appear before the notary public and sign the Incorporation Act on their behalf. It is very simple, and it literally takes the time that the mail takes between traveling from their country to ours. The third step is carrying out the registration before the Public Registry of Commerce, which is done in a couple of days. And afterwards, we have to register the company before the Mexican Tax Authority to obtain a tax ID number and electronic tax signature, which will be used by the company to comply with its tax obligations. Then, if you are planning to hire Mexican personnel or foreign personnel, you need to register before the Social Security Institute, and for foreign personnel purposes, the National Migration Institute. You will then be obligated to register the company before the Foreign Investments National Registry for the fact of having foreign capital invested in Mexico. And if applicable, you will need to carry out any special licenses or authorizations to enter into specific business activities, for example, importing, exporting, rendering specialized services, and these permissions will be determined on a case-by-case basis. All right. Speaking about value-added tax, and I will try to be to provide a deeper explanation here in very general terms. The value-added tax law in Mexico taxes and the alienation of goods or assets, the rendering of services, the granting of temporary use or enjoyment of assets, and the import of goods or services. As you can see, exports are not taxed by the value-added tax, and we have a 16% rate, as I said, except for transactions in the northern border, which are currently taxed at an 8% rate. And as Tom mentioned, we have a very large border with the U.S., and the government issued a bill by means of which they granted a value-added tax exemption of 50% of the value-added tax for these transactions, as long as they were carried out in the northern border of the country with the U.S., aiming at just like increasing the economic activity in this part of the country. And well, you can carry out this offsetting procedure, as I said, on a monthly basis, and the VAT will be payable in this monthly basis. All right. Regarding the income tax, as I mentioned, there is no local income tax, but just a federal income tax, which is a 30% general rate. And well, you will be obligated to acknowledge basically your income on a worldwide basis, and this income will then be reduced with the corresponding deductions, and you will determine your tax results as it is done in many parts of the world. And the net operating losses may be carried forward for a period of 10 years, and for Mexican tax purposes, and this net operating losses will be subject to inflationary effects. All right. And well, the general and very general tax duties of any Mexican legal entity will be to submit monthly advanced. I'm sorry, these are wrong, because the VAT returns are definitive and the income tax returns are advanced. So this, you can switch both the first ones, and the second one you can switch the advanced and definitive tag on them, but they are both submitted on a monthly basis, and then you will have an annual income tax return which is due on March of each fiscal year, and the fiscal year are match the calendar years, all right, for Mexican tax purposes. And you will have to carry out monthly Social Security payments if you have employees. If you don't, then you will only need to be concerned about VAT and income tax. These are like general tax obligations for Mexican legal entities. And regarding accounting and auditing of obligations, the legal entities are obligated to keep their accountancy record for a period of 10 years in terms of the commercial entities law. And legal entities are not obligated to audit their financial statements. Actually, this will be modified starting from January 1st, 2022, because the tax bill reforms for fiscal year 2022 have passed. So starting from January 1st, legal entities will be obliged, but starting from just legal entities who have a taxable income which is bigger than 1.6 thousand million pesos, which is a very big amount, and many entities will not reach that amount. But still, many foreign entities which don't get to that number, well, they are used to auditing their financial statements, right? The statute of limitations for the tax authority to audit or to review the tax duties of a legal entity is 5 years. So if you manage to go through this 5 year period, then you can celebrate, because the tax authority will be no longer entitled to review your tax situation. And well, lastly, which structure fits me best? As I said at the beginning, as well, Tom and Keith mentioned, this will be an analysis that requires a case-to-case scenario, and well, they will only make sense if analyzed by jointly with your business activities and with your expectations. We've seen these three models make sense. We've also seen partnerships with local associates make sense, but I believe that both both analysis from an economic and business standpoint, and from a legal and tax standpoint, is required to ensure that the business will make sense, will be profitable, and that the figure that you use will eventually meet your needs and will be fit for what you guys want in terms of growth. And what we have also seen is, for example, I can tell you that we are actually like a couple of months ago, we decided with a foreign company that it is a video game developer company that has had a significant growth in the Mexican market. They are currently a branch, but after analyzing jointly with them their current situation, we got to the conclusion that they needed to just jump into incorporating a Mexican legal entity, because it made more sense and it would bring more benefits from a corporate point of view to their ambition. So you can also start with a rep office or start joining with a local partner. And then if the business is good and it looks good, then you can jump into incorporating a Mexican legal entity in a couple of years. So we've seen this sort of scenarios all the time. And I will join Keith's comments and Tom's comments regarding the fact that the Mexican market is a great market, and it is a market that is open for new opportunities. And please do feel free to contact us if you got any further queries, or I mean, we will have a session of Q&As, I believe, now. But if you guys want to write or something, please do feel free to do so. All right.
Well, Ricardo, thank you very much. That was very informative. The numbers are swimming around in my head now, trying to understand all that. But it does seem to be straightforward. I'm very glad that you were able to present that and demonstrate how to do business in Mexico. There must be some questions from the participants.
I've got a question again.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Well, it's a general question actually for Mr. Ricardo. I want to learn about the continuity of the commerce law articles in Mexico. Is it changing a lot, or it got a base? Can you mention a little bit? Can you say that it doesn't change the commerce law articles in here, or it changed very frequently? Maybe you can say.
I was the commercial articles you said.
Yeah, about the commercial articles. How rare
Yeah.
it's changing in there.
No, not really. I mean, actually, the commercial regulations in Mexico rarely are rarely more modified. The latest reform we had on the commercial entities law, which is like the most relevant law for commercial entities purposes, was made in 2014, and before that, we didn't have a reform. I believe since like 2002 or something like that. It is not really common that these commercial regulations change, and I believe that this is due to the fact that the Mexican commercial entities law is already very flexible for entities to organize themselves in a way that makes sense for them. And I mean, we have seen this many times that, for example, foreign entities approach to us and say, "Hey, I want to structure my company in a way that this shareholder gets this benefit and this other shareholder gets this other benefit, and we want to limit our duties and our responsibilities." And this all can be done because the commercial entity law is really wide and flexible in this sense. You can issue like a variety of share certificates with different rights and duties for every shareholder. So I believe that in general terms, it is not really necessary to amend in a more frequent way this law, and the federal the federal rule makers are in the same way. It is not like a top priority for them.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Other questions for Ricardo or Tom?
I have a question for Ricardo, if there aren't any other questions at this moment. Ricardo, regarding the difference between the representation office and the branch figure of operations, I think if I understood correctly, you mentioned that they have a lot of similarities, but certain differences. If you were a foreign company evaluating these different options for operating in Mexico, could you say one or maybe two things that are the key differences you would want to consider between branch and representation office?
Absolutely. This is a very good question, actually. Well, I would say that this all depends on um, which are the activities that you want the local office in Mexico, I mean, to carry out in view of the headquarters activities. If the headquarters is carry out business activities, for example, consisting on rendering services for it comes to my mind, for example, a current client of ours that renders educational services through digital platforms. And if you want the local office to render or to just go and look out for clients and close businesses and enter into business agreements, the same as the headquarters, then you probably won't fit into a representative office, because this is not an auxiliary activity to the main business activities of the headquarters, you know? So if you want the Mexican office to do the same or part of the business activities of a larger entity or foreign entity, then I would directly go to a branch. But if you want the Mexican office to just aid or assist the headquarters with some specific activities that will not conclude on a business or an agreement, a business agreement for the headquarters, for example, many many foreign agents have representative office in Mexico just to announce their products, right? Just to carrying out marketing activities of their products, but they do not conclude any agreement or close any business here in Mexico. So if you want just to give some publicity to your product and let people know that you are selling something in other countries, then a representative office will do just fine, I believe.
Okay, great, thank you.
And is there any different taxes for software works? For example, as a software company, if I come and open an office in there, is there any differential taxes for my job? Because I'm going to sell the software products.
Well, no, not really. Actually, the Mexican income tax law, which is like the most relevant um, law for tax purposes, it sets forth a general regime for corporations. So any corporation, regardless of their business activity, will be obligated to determine their income tax on the same way. And what you will have is that, for example, we have a relatively new reform in Mexico that entered in 2020, in mid 2020, for digital platforms. All right, but this is applicable to foreign residents who carry out business transactions through digital platforms in favor of Mexican residents. So this is the only, I would say, special regime, but it is applicable for foreign residents, not Mexican residents. So we have had a lot of consultations about this new regime, because it is not a new tax but a new regime. Because, for example, you've had like a very illustrative case, Netflix, for example. Netflix is a digital platform that renders services through an online app. And starting in 2020, well, they had to register themselves here in Mexico for rendering these services through a digital platform to Mexican users. So they are obligated to determine their income tax on a different way, but their value-added tax in a different way. But apart from that, you can carry out any business activity and you will be obligated to determine your income tax in the same way. The only important consideration will be for goods that are comprised in the special um, uh, goods and services tax, right? Which, as I said, you've got cigarettes, alcohol, energy drinks, and like this products that are usually taxed with a higher tax rate around the globe. In the U.S., are also that is why cigarettes are so expensive worldwide, right?
Yeah, it's same for worldwide. This kind of products. Thank you.
Okay, Azal or Turl, I think we've answered all the questions. I don't see any hands up, so.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry.
yeah. Sorry. I mean, it's like very quick question before we just finish up here. So, to Ricardo and Tom, actually, both may answer from their perspectives differently. Is there any advantage of having a Mexican company if you want to do business like with Canada or US, as opposed to having a company set up anywhere else in the world? Taking that the NAFTA agreement, or with the new name, then there's a cooperation agreement. North America is in place.
Ricardo, do you
Like
have any?
business-wise, and also from from incentives or legal perspectives, all point of view. So,
I mean, I would think the answer is yes, but I would prefer to defer to Ricardo on this one.
Well, I mean, I believe that from strictly a legal and a tax standpoint, I would say that one of the largest advantages of having a Mexican legal entity is that Mexico has got treaties to avoid double taxation with most of the civilized and countries around the globe. So if you come from a country which has got OECD practices or uses OECD standards, and you want to carry out a business in Mexico, you will very likely be subject, or have you will very likely have the possibility of structuring your business in a way that avoids doubling your taxation. And well, this is very important because not every country has got this possibility and this variety of tax treaties. And from a legal point of view, I would say that I mean I don't know and like the special regime to incorporate an entity in the rest of the countries in the world, but uh, we've incorporated companies here in Mexico in a week, you know, so it's a really easy procedure, and it may take longer, but this will rely on each client's needs and well, also the pandemic, of course, because well, the local authorities are not working on the same speed as usual, but I mean, I do join Tom in his comments when he said that unfortunately the local federal government is not aiming at creating incentives for foreign investment in Mexico. Like I mean, it will last 3 years, hopefully. But however, or regardless of that, from my point of view and what I have seen with our clients, which are usually foreign companies that come into Mexico for business purposes, they're doing just fine. You know, they're doing fine because the good thing, and I will just give the word to Tom in a moment, but what I have seen is you really in many sectors, I mean not in all of them, but in many sectors, especially in the largest sectors of the Mexican economy, you don't need an additional incentive from the government to have a profitable business. So if you structure your business appropriately and you make the right decisions from the beginning, the business will be profitable regardless of the fact that the government is granted incentives or additional bonuses to the companies. Would you agree with me on that one, Tom?
Oh, yes, certainly. And I would just like to add one complimentary comment that strictly in terms of selling products into the North American market, the North American Free Trade Agreement is very specific about the content of manufactured goods in terms of qualifying for duty-free status. And so in the recent renegotiation of the Free Trade Agreement that came into effect, the new version of the Free Trade Agreement came into effect last year, they have adjusted some of the content requirements. So even if a Chinese company that has a subsidiary in Mexico ships a lot of products to the Mexican subsidiary in order to sell them to the United States, they still may not qualify for duty advantages because of the content, the Chinese-made content of the products. That's one simple aspect of that. Although certainly, if a foreign company has a physical presence and an operational presence in Mexico, that provides some advantages, of course, for interacting with colleagues and other companies in the United States. But just in terms of selling the products, I would need to consider the content of the manufacturing. However, that's why a lot of the companies from other countries actually manufacture, and in a lot of cases, they manufacture specifically with the content requirements in mind in order to qualify for duty-free status for selling their goods into the US and Canadian markets. And Mexico also has a lot of trade facilitation agreements with other Latin American countries. And so if you really analyze the details with a specific target market in mind for your products, you could provide a certain amount of inputs from the home country and add a certain amount of value in a Mexican manufacturing or transformation operation in order to qualify for duty-free status or reduced duty status in different markets, whether they be North American or South American. So that's something to consider on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Thank you. So, right. Okay, I'll just kick it back to Keith first.
Sure. Well, thank you, Ricardo and Tom. I really appreciate the presentations and the information that you've shared with the audience today. I think all of our leaders here and companies that have participated, and we appreciate the opportunity to partner with you in the future. So I'll turn it back over to Hazal or Turl.
Okay, yeah, I would just before Hazal finishes up here, and I just want to thank.
If there's no question, I want to say something. I don't have question, but I want to say something. If there's no question, we held the United States session yesterday with the participation of the Minister of Trade officials and commercial attachés and participants. I think it was really fruitful for all of us. And as of today, and for the Mexico session, thank you very much, Keith, Tom, and Ricardo, for addressing these interesting topics. And of course, dear participants, thank you very much for taking the time to participate. That's all what I want to say.
Okay, thank you also to P3 Innovation and to our colleagues at Gazi Technopark, and to you, Hazal, for inviting us and for allowing us to participate. It's been a pleasure for us as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Ricardo. And Keith, thank you very much for all your contribution and participation. Herkese çok teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Ben Hazal'a bırakacağım sözü. Hazal Hanım'a. Katıldığınız için. Dünkü Amerika toplantısı da bugünkü Meksika toplantısı da yani verimli geçti. Tabii dünkü daha uzundu, daha kapsamlıydı. Bugünkü daha kısa bir toplantıydı. Ama bütün katılanlara, dinleyenlere, katkıda bulunanlara umarım faydalı olmuştur. Herkese Gazi Teknopark adına, kendim adına, şahsım adına ben tekrar teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Hazal Hanım'a da özellikle teşekkür ediyorum. Bu güzel organizasyonu böyle bu halde yaptığı için, gerçekleştirdiği için. Herkese iyi akşamlar diliyorum.
Ben de bütün katılımcılarımıza ve aynı zamanda konuşmacılarımıza katılımlar için ve vermiş oldukları destek için çok teşekkür ediyorum. Umarım hepimiz için istenen amaca ulaşmıştır etkinliğimiz. Katılımlarınız için çok teşekkür ediyorum tekrar. Herkese ben de iyi akşamlar diliyorum.